Now to try and keep this barge afloat, we actually got some skis, which I believe are off of a Skidoo Summit. Not sure what era exactly, but from what I've been able to find on the internet, they're not very desirable, but I'm guessing that's why the price was right and why I own them. I mean, probably ought to replace that skag. It's got a little bit of sway to it. Now, I really didn't check the bolt pattern on here, or the saddle width, but I think we're just going to have to make it work. Well, we thought we had replacement carbides, but they've got an extra stud. Luckily the skis are kind of provisioned for that, but they didn't have the hole drilled through, and we're going to have to trim down this little plastic guide thing there. Also got that sweet snow flap, picked it up at the swap meet for $1. Well, I gotta say, that is some tenacious mold or mildew or whatever is on this green here. Sandpaper, carb cleaner, WD-40, knife blade. This stuff is like super embedded into the green rubber. I guess it's gonna look grungy. I suppose I got what I paid for on that. So we had 390s in the carbs, and I did a little bit of research. I think we'll be good with 380s, as long as we're not running in too cold of weather. But while I did that, I also lowered the needles, well, raised them 1 clip height to try and avoid any mid-range lean burn down. So that's how I'd rather be. A little bit rich in the mid-range and crisp up on wide open. Hey, it's always a fun time wrestling those suspensions out of there. Well, I guess this sled wasn't all it was cracked up to be. Look at that suspension. Yeah, we're going to have to fix that. The other side's not much better. So we got that out of the way. Now it's time to pull the track out. And it's going to be a little bit complicated with all that reverse stuff. So we're trying to keep this project on track and get everything tore down and disassembled and ready to go back together. We're waiting on some parts for the suspension. We got the whole chain case out, and the gears and the sprocket, or the sprockets and the chain got some wear, but they're not too bad. Luckily the little idler shaft there, it looks to be in good shape, so hopefully we don't need any hard parts for the chain case. Never leave an opportunity to at least check or re-lube one of these bearings, because they'll get you and they're hard to change. Ha, looks like somebody's been in there before. Make sure you do a professional job of cleaning all these threads out. Well, we've been hammering on that one cross through bolt that holds on the bottom shock pivot and that row of idler wheels there, and man, it does not want to come out of there. Also found some previous repairs. Maybe somebody used this as a snowcross sled at one point. Well, we're making progress. I don't know if it's forward or not, but kind of getting the suspension torn apart. Boy, this thing's been a bear. Boy, this thing was just hanging on by a thread. Well, actually this side wasn't connected at all. Well, say goodbye to the old Sharp Ride suspension. Yeah, you probably shouldn't be able to do this with a shock. Yeah, it was working hard. Well, since those shocks are shot, we went back into the archives and found another suspension that's of similar design. I think it's a previous Fast Track or whatever. Very similar though. And we're sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul here, because I'm going to grab them 2 shocks out of this suspension and throw them in the other one. Now this kind of brings up a good question. Why don't I just use this suspension instead of that busted up one over there? Well, to be honest, I kind of like that green on there, and I'd hate to paint it black because I think this sled needs a black suspension again. Now I didn't measure it either. I would assume that it bolts in with the same spacing in between the 2 arms, but There are some minor differences on the way things are welded. This older suspension definitely, the other suspension cracked right down there. It's actually more beefed up on the newer one than this one. So maybe we'll just keep it, keep it stock and fix that one. I mean, this one's still got good slides too. This would be a perfect upgrade retrofit somewhere down the line. I'll just have to steal the shocks back. Well, this is not good. I can't get that bolt out either on the suspension. It's not even wanting to budge. So I think we're going to have to resort to cutting that bolt out down there in that shock. Yeah, that bolt's going to be cheaper than my frustration trying to get that other one out. Boy, there's getting to be too many pieces of this suspension just scattered about everywhere. I hope it only goes back together one way. Whoa, Nelly. Christmas came late, but it's shiny. And there's not many new parts like that show up in the shop. Ooh, billet, aluminum. Yeah, I can't believe I actually spent the money. These parts sat in the cart online for like 4 months before I bought them. But it's like a legit tunnel extension. And I gotta say, it actually, they did a pretty nice job. So yeah, we're gonna stretch that stock suspension out and see how she rolls. So we sort of need to fix this thing before we actually start putting the suspension back together. But it's like raining a ½ inch an hour outside, so we gotta hold off for now. Boy, that was a job getting the bumper off. Of course, all those little clips that hold it on were rusted and I had to cut them out. So now we get to cut the back of that tunnel off, which I kind of hate because there's some good stickers on there. So you try and follow the instructions, and I put a straight edge on here, so I'd get a nice straight cut. Yeah, sure enough, it ends up moving. Should have just freehanded it. Well, there it is, sort of mocked up. But we're quickly running out of garage space. I'm going to have to pop a few more rivets out of there to get the tunnel extension to slide forward the whole way. It's kind of hanging up on the back of the heat exchanger. Which, by the way, you got to be very careful you don't cut through. Alright, starting to come together now. I got to pop out one more row of rivets down there to let that thing slide in. Now for best results, you should always paint when it's 20 degrees and snowing outside. So we're not sure if this is 100% correct, but this is the way it's going together. It took some time to align it, and I think it's about the best we're going to get. I mean, I'm kind of surprised actually at how good that paint turned out. See, sub-zero temperatures do help. Alright, well, we got that taken care of. Well, we popped the clutch off there, and we'll see what we're working with. I didn't really see any spider cracks on first glance, so that was good. Yeah, there's some markings. 01 ZRT 800. So definitely not the stock clutch. So somebody's been in there before. So we got the secondary tore apart here. And I was thinking maybe there was a piece of belt cord or something down in the secondary, because it was kind of stuck, a bit too wide open and the belt was sitting down in it. Well, we just got one heck of a stack of washers in there. Not sure exactly what somebody was doing, but we're going to have to change that. So it looks like we got a bushing blown out on one of the flyweights. You can kind of see where the arm was rubbing away and giving some weight savings to the spider there. Luckily the rollers seem to be all pretty good, so that's kind of a break, but always pays to take stuff apart and inspect it. Flyweight hanging up like that, it'll either stick and you lose performance, or heck, starts grinding away at everything else, and next thing you know it breaks or jams up and you're stuck on the side of the trail. Yeah, I'd say that bushing's pretty much poached. Now we popped the old weight out of there. Well, the old bushing, I mean. Gotta throw a new one in. Now these little bushings aren't exactly cheap. I think they're like 13 bucks for a pack of 3, which I really hate spending. But they are cheaper than buying new flyweights, so I guess there's that. Now I have installed these little buggers here without the proper tools before, and you can make it work. I've also screwed them up and botched them. So I actually did, also get a tool. This little mandrel here that the little bushing fits onto, and this gives it support and a stopper for when you drive it into the weights. Now you got to be careful with it too, but it definitely helps your success rate in installing these. Well, there we go. 2 out of 3 rollers are placed. That's the majority, so I consider it a rebuild. Boy, if only I could add up all the hours I spent with a Scotch-Brite pad cleaning things up. It's one never-ending process of getting rid of stink bugs. So I'd actually grabbed these parts off of my 93 Thundercat that I've turned into an asphalt sled. So don't need mirrors for that. I thought this riser was going to work on the new one. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite match up. That sucks. Well, I've kind of been waffling back and forth on whether to take this motor apart and give it a thorough inspection. We went inside with the cam and things look good, but man, it's hard to keep a clear conscience when you know half that reed cage got sucked through the motor. And the big thing I'm worried about is what you can't see, that counterbalance shaft down there. Now you see that gear, well, that little bump there, that's where the drive gear goes to the counterbalance shaft, and all the lubricating oil actually gets passed through a little passage in there. So that's what gives any of the residual oil to those bearings. Wouldn't it be something if there was a chunk of plastic or reed cage somehow got wedged or up inside there and it's just waiting to destroy one of those bearings? And if that counterbalance shaft goes out, it could take out a whole bunch of stuff. And crankshafts for these are not cheap. Tell you, these little intake gaskets are like $7, maybe plus shipping. So yeah, we're back to the old universal. Practically good as OEM. So that took maybe 7 minutes to make that. So, break that down. That's 60 bucks an hour. Good money. Well, this is rare, but I think I might actually cave in and spend some money. I mean, I'd say the air boot's kind of shot a little bit. So, gotta put a new one on. Of course, it's like $95 from Cat, but I guess at least they're still making it. Luckily, that one's still good because that one's no longer available. Whew, well, there it is. I hope the sled appreciates that. You see that stamp right there? That means that the snowmobile has passed the international certification for the airbox being a major pain in the ass and not going in. Like trying to jam a 2-inch track into this thing has been less painful thus far as trying to reinstall the airbox. See that stamp right there? That means this snowmobile has passed the international test for not being able to install an airbox back into it. So this doesn't happen often, but we actually got a tape measure out and checked things ahead of time. And if you look at those little cutouts there, you kind of see this piece of wear right there. Well, they didn't cut that notch quite wide enough, so it was actually rubbing on the heat exchanger, and that matches with what my measurements say. So before we try and wedge this thing into there, we're going to have to go down each lug and knock about a 1/4 inch off of this, open up this notch. Sounds like fun. So we got the track in there. I tell you what, it's certainly tight up there between the tunnel and the top of them drivers. Now I hope it works. Well, that got hot at one time. I guess you can call that a dripstick now. Now this is something that actually kind of aggravates me. There was a whole bunch of RTV just smeared all over this chain case cover. It's just a little bit. And when you do this, it's like getting hooked on crack. Once you start, I mean, now you're stuck forever having to use this RTV because you never get all the other little bits out of there. And if you don't use it, one of those little bits gets caught on the gasket surface and you're leaking. So, yeah. Well, stuff's coming back together now. I mean, we just don't have time to give it a thorough cleaning, so going back together as is. Alright, well, we got that welded up. Good enough for now. Now the tough part is reassembling this suspension. It's been like a week or two, and I've pretty much forgot how it came apart. Now that's my kind of oil injection. So these were the idler wheels that went on here, and we're going to get rid of them for weight savings. But we kind of need some spacers to actually, get these to sit right. So instead of actually getting a bushing, which we don't have, we're just going to pop these out of here, instead of throwing them out, and use those little plastic spacers, slap them on there. Well, here's a bonus of getting rid of them wheels. Now you can take that bolt out of there and change the shock without pulling that whole center shaft there. Sometimes laziness does pay off. Well, got that half together. Well, of course things were going too easy, so something had to pop up. That's the original cross shaft there for the front shock, which is a heavy steel with a couple of aluminum spacers. The shock, which came with these bushings, which are pretty thick, okay? And this is the bushing that was on that steel shaft, a lot thinner. This shock came off of this cross shaft that has a smaller diameter crossbar. Of course, this bushing is like such an odd size, there's no way. I mean, I'm trying to make something, I can't even do it. So we gave up on that. Now we got to swap in, pillage the other suspension for this part so we can use this shock just so we can use the bushing. Now the little idler wheel mounts won't fit, so we had to file them down to get them to clear those bolts. Yeah, it figures that the chain case is leaking. I'm just going to hope I overfilled it a bit. Maybe it'll level out. So I was wondering why this aluminum bushing here wasn't moving inside the plastic spring retainer. That's some pretty gnarly corrosion going on there. Boy, that's pretty crazy. It's like it's got two little spots where it just really reacted, corroded. Jeez, was this thing used as a plow truck? Well, we got a handful of bearings we got to replace and some idler wheels. But I'd say the suspension is pretty much back together enough to start adding on those rail extensions. Alright, now we're finally getting down to business. Putting on the rail extensions. And we actually had to modify them a little bit. I had to cut about a 1/4 inch off of that side on the inside to clear these suspension blocks. Sweet. Well, we're getting there. Hammering those slides on there was a little bit of a chore, but nothing the hammer couldn't handle. I like how these kind of have the tipped up rails at the end. I guess in theory you're supposed to only have, a short track length on the ground, and then since this section here kind of tilts back, it's supposed to make it easier to steer. I don't know, I guess we'll find out. Well, we got the clutches back on and a new belt installed. Well, not really a new belt, it was actually the belt that was on the guard, so we just switched them. So you remember all those shims that we took out of the secondary clutch there? Well, we took a good guess, but we came up about, I'd say 5 thousandths short on the shim stack, and the belt was just a little bit too tight on the primary. So we get to take the whole thing back off again and take it apart. Well, now comes the fun part, shoving that long suspension in there. I'll save you the POV and cursing on that. So at the moment, this thing is now too long to bypass in the garage. It's taking up all of it. So I got to use my fancy little grabber here to actually go adjust the heater. Well, this kind of sucks. I thought those skis were going to fit on there, and they're like a 1/16 of an inch away from fitting. Believe me, we tried to make them fit. They won't go. So I guess we got to go back to the old, well, what was on there before, which are not the stalkers, but they're aftermarkets. That sucks. I really wanted some wide flotation skis. Well, there she is, all dressed up and ready to go. And the motivation I had to get this thing done was they were calling for, 12 to 18 inches of snow. Of course they failed, and it's currently raining outside, and we might not get anything. So, hooray for that. Frickin' awesome. Maybe those 2-inch lugs will help in all that mud we're gonna have. Or maybe they'll just work well at, shoveling away all the hopes and dreams that I had for this season. I mean, I should just go to strictly, grass drag sleds and asphalt sleds, because apparently we're never going to be able to ride these things around here again.